All right. Welcome to our next episode of our Fuel Up series. Jess, you've got a career in being a DJ, I think, with that song selection. Nice job. Zeppelin, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
honestly one of my favorite songs. So I'm so glad you guys picked it today. Thank you.
That's awesome. Nice work on that. So, for our audience, welcome to our episode of Fuel Up, the Fuel Up series. We're going to be focused in today on career pathways inside the industry. And as you can see, I have a stellar panel today to really talk through industry experience. And we're going to be getting some great insights and feedback from them in their years inside the industry. So, but I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves here in just a minute. But we'll just cover a few housekeeping items real quick. So, for schedule wise, we're going to have this structured conversation panel session, and then towards the end of our time, we're going to have a Q&A with the panel. So you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of the panel as we go, and I'll help facilitate that. So at the bottom, there's a Q&A box. You can just drop questions in the chat there at any time during our conversation. So if we're talking about a specific topic that intrigues you, certainly, and you got a question, hop in and put a note in the chat. And then also, if you'd be so kind, if you are directing that towards any one of our panelists specifically, drop their name in the chat as well. Outside of that, only one more housekeeping item. We've got a couple polls that we're going to pull up as we go through. So it would be great if you could interact with us and answer those polls as we go. We'll stop a couple times. I believe there's two in there, and I'll read those out, and you can interact with us on those polls as well. So certainly appreciate everybody joining us today. So without further ado, we have a lot of conversation to have. I'm going to start with Yara first, and then we'll go over to Joanna and then Jess. But would ask you to do just a quick intro. What company you're with and a little bit about your current role at that company would be great. So Yara, I'll turn it over to you real quick.
Thank you, Shawn. My name is Yara Kfouri. I work at Strathmore Landscaping based in Montreal, Quebec. I've been with the company for 8 years. Started as an estimator, and right now I'm a contract and estimation coordinator with the company, which basically helps all of our account managers be more efficient in their output.
Awesome. Thanks, Yara. And primarily completely based in Canada, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. It's great to have you with us. Joanna?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Shawn. I'm Joanna Englander. I'm a business developer with BrightView Landscapes. We are nationwide, of course, but I'm based out of Columbus, Ohio. Previously, I've been a branch administrator and a sales coordinator with BrightView. I've been here for a little over 9 years. But right now, my primary focus is helping develop new relationships and help our company grow through those developments and working with our ops team to do so. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Joanna. Appreciate you being here with us and sharing some of your experience. And last but not least, Jessica.
Hey, Shawn, thank you. Jessica Volpe, Enterprise Customer Success Manager here at Attentive.ai. I've been with Attentive since October of 23, but prior to that, I always age myself when I say 20 years. So it wasn't quite 20 years. It was about 16 years in the landscape industry. So we'll go with that.
It's
Thanks
so
for having
funny.
me.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Jess. It's so funny because like when we're only been in the industry like 6, 7 years, we're like, it's been 10 years. And then when we get to like 16 or 17 years, it's like, well, let's not say 20. That sounds too much.
Too young.
Awesome. Awesome. And I'm Shawn. I help lead our field services business here at Attentive. So welcome everyone to our panelists and welcome to our audience. Thank you for being here. Fun fact, I have worked with all these great ladies in one form or fashion, as either a customer of ours or side by side at a company as well. So I know all three of them fairly well, and you're in for a treat today with their experience and their insights as well. So we've got a lot to get to. So I want to jump in, and I think Joanna, I'm going to come to you first here. So scope of the landscape industry, right? I'm thinking there's so much to it, right? There's that when you really dive into it, there's residential landscape maintenance, there's residential construction, you flow into the commercial maintenance business, ancillary. There's businesses out there that are just commercial construction as well. And then, there's irrigation, there's arboriculture, so companies that are just focused on tree work and all the like. So there's tons of information, tons of opportunities out there. I'd really like to zero in on your experience first on, what roles have you held in the industry specifically and walk us through maybe a couple pieces and parts of those. And then, did you have any favorite sections of those roles, so to speak? Like what got your motor going on those specific roles that you had? So it'd be great to kind of understand that.
Yeah. So like I mentioned briefly, but we'll get in a little more detail. At BrightView, I was a branch administrator, which really primarily, it was very internally focused. I dealt with customers a little bit, but I was really supporting the branch from an administrative perspective. So a lot of accounting, payroll, bookkeeping, those types of things. I did that for about, I think, just shy of 3 years. And then I transitioned into a sales coordinator position at BrightView, where again, I was supporting the people that I am now. I was supporting a large team of business developers. So I was still internally focused in terms of like our folks were my customers, so to speak, but with a much more through a totally different lens as we were looking at growth as opposed to like really taking care of our existing customers. I did that for about 4 years. Before moving into the position I'm in now, which I've done we're coming on 3. Prior to BrightView, I worked for a company that I would call like industry adjacent. So it wasn't like commercial landscaping, but they did interior plants and containers, like what you see in like hospitals, hotels, malls, those sorts of things. They did the closest to what we do is like exteriors, like when we, plant annuals and exteriors, especially in urban areas or outdoor malls. And interior atriums. So there I was like it was a small, like to medium-sized family-owned company. So it's like the positions just grow as they see fit. So we joked when I was leaving that I never even had an official title because it just like morphed into what it was. But the closest would be like an account manager, project manager there. A lot of management with existing customers, as well as like working on innovative projects within the company.
Gotcha.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Joanna. Go ahead.
I was just going to say during that time, I also, when I was a sales coordinator with BrightView support, worked towards getting my MBA, which was, I think, I have like thoughts about how maybe I'll talk about that later, but I think it had a lot to do with how I ended up even in my position now for my own, I think honestly from like building my own confidence to take the next step. I don't think BrightView would have required that I have an advanced degree, but I think it was when I became a sales coordinator, people on the team were like, you should be a business developer. And I was like, yeah, no way. That's not for me. No way. No way. And then I went through that course of getting my degree, and I think it leveled up my own confidence and something that previously had seemed scary to me. I was like, yeah, fine, I'll try it. I'll give it a shot. I think it still felt a little scary, but I felt like I was ready to do something scarier.
Yeah, a lot of great things come out of getting out of your comfort zone. One thing in particular that I wanted to touch on, Joanna, just with your experiences, and a lot of times you don't see this, is you were internal facing. So your internal customer, so to speak, were your other teammates that you were helping and support, and not only your branch administrator role, but your sales coordinator role. And then you made the move to being customer facing, which presents this whole other world and challenges, opportunities that come with it. Can you kind of give us a quick recap of like what that transition was like? Any big bullet points there on that actual transition?
Yeah, I mean, so I think in some ways it was a big shift, but in other ways it wasn't this huge change that I thought it was going to be. There's like some very common through lines that I don't know if I was expecting at first, but then when I realized them, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Maybe I should have known that would be the case. What was true in my more internally focused role, which is still true now, is that I love working with people. And so whether that's like working with my team and it's more so the same people day to day, or whether I'm out meeting new people and developing new relationships, like that was a very easy. I remember saying to someone once who had sort of been with me through the transition, I was like, oh, I'm just having more conversation. I'm just meeting more people and having more conversations. Like this thing that had this amorphous thing that had felt scary. I was like, oh, I could talk to people and ask questions all day long. And I do now. So that was like a very common through line. And I think too, the other things that have served me all the way through is my brain is a very like servant mindset. And like problem solving. I am always trying to like, there's an issue, instantly go to, oh, that's an opportunity. How can I solve for that problem? And so that's always been true. Like whether I was trying to help my internal teams with obstacles or roadblocks or frustrations that they were having, and I was trying to figure out ways to help with that. Or now in my current role where I'm really more customer facing, I love having conversations with customers about what maybe are some frustrations or roadblocks that they're currently experiencing, and how can I be of service to them and solve for that. So in a lot of ways, like, the base has felt, maybe how I go about those things is a little different, but in a lot of ways they still feel similar to me, these positions that I've had, because I'm still coming from the same place, I think, in those, at least few regards.
That's great insight. To use your language, the through line was dealing with people and helping solve problems, which are two great assets, right? I think if you're going to be in the landscape industry, whether you're operations, sales, administrative, contracts, whatever it is, you're going to be dealing with people and you need to help solve problems. That's kind of why we're here in the companies to help that. So great insight, Joanna. I appreciate that. Jess, I want to move over to you here. You know, lots of different places. We talked about the vastness of the landscape industry, but there's lots of entry points, right? You know, I started personally as like just a crew leader in the industry, and kind of getting my hands dirty out in the field, but there's tons of entry points. I would love to have you kind of talk through, you know, where did you get to start in the industry, and, you know, what were some key learnings about your initial start in the industry that you'd, you know, like to share with the team?
Yeah, so I got my start. Honestly, at the time I was a stay-at-home mom, so I was just looking for something just to kind of fill gaps in my day. So I started with a small landscape company where I was their office manager. It was very small. It was close to home. It was easy. Like, I knew the functions of office management. That wasn't an issue, but trying to navigate through the landscape side of things and really having to learn, like, what are all these services and why are people upset? And that, you know, I kind of, same as Joanna, like, I always leaned to trying to help people, trying to solve problems. So for me, all my key takeaways were trying to figure out what are the problems and how do we solve for them. And that's kind of what propelled me into, you know, an even larger role in the landscape industry. And when I had moved on, I took another position as a mom just to fill my day. And I think I started out filing at a company just to kind of help out. And then I went into the accounting position, and you may or may not know this about me, but I tend to take on more responsibilities than I have initially committed to. So I just began, you know, my roles just kept expanding because I was willing to take on more and more work. But for me, the key was understanding not only the ins and outs of the industry, but the people within the industry. And I think for women in the industry, sometimes we struggle a little bit because we don't want to speak up, or maybe we speak up too much. I was definitely the latter. And trying to navigate through that and how I fit into the industry, because it wasn't necessarily my industry to begin with. I had gone to school for education. I had gone to school for criminal justice. So it wasn't even in my wheelhouse. So I really had to listen to the people around me and gain knowledge from them. And I was fortunate to just have so many great people to learn from along my way.
Yeah, that's great feedback. And I have the same experience from just like learning from the people that, like, it's one thing to learn something in a formal education session, but when you get in the real world and you got to get something done and you get some people to help kind of mentor you and speak into your life, I mean, that just takes you so much farther, I think. So good insight there, Jess. Appreciate that. Yara, I would love to come to you next and understand like where you got your start in the landscaping and, you know, field services and green industry. And then, you know, kind of the same thread or same question there, like what are some key learnings from your side? Are they similar to what Jess shared or anything different there?
Well, I initially started as a site auditor / estimator. Basically, I would go on site with the account managers to evaluate the properties and then take notes as to what areas need improvement, what about maintenance improvement, what about projects, and so on. So, and then from there, we would develop site reports, proposals, and so on. So kind of along the lines of Joanna, I started as an estimator and organically grew into a sales coordination role within the company, which was mostly client facing. And then from there, it kind of grew into also supporting internally our teams, getting information if we weren't able to find them, always trying to get answers if we're missing any. So it kind of combined external and internal facing answers, basically. And that's how I ended up being in the role that I have right now, contract coordination. And the same thing as both Jess and Joanna, I'm also solution driven. I'm the kind of person who takes initiative and goes into looking for answers whenever it's missing, or kind of simplify processes for anyone who's involved in a project, basically.
Awesome. Awesome. No, that's good. I think the solution oriented side is a common theme here. I know all three of you very well, and I would say all three of you fit into that bucket immensely on finding solutions to problems. So I appreciate you sharing that, Yara. I'd like to stay with you, Yara, and just talk a little bit about, outside of just initial experience, there's some common skills, common certifications that are pretty prevalent that kind of come into the landscape industry. So in your mind, day to day out in the industry, what are you seeing from a skills needed outside of the solution oriented piece that we covered, right? What are some skills and maybe even some certifications that our audience might be needing to get some more detail or information on to upskill themselves?
Well, obviously in the landscape industry, you have different roles. So depending on the role you're filling in the industry, you might require different either skill set or qualifications. For instance, any crew that's on site, ideally they'd have some horticultural certification, plant identification, first and foremost, obviously safety for all of our crews, because they use equipment and machinery for maintenance. So, and then internally, in terms of like the office people, the more technical skills they have, the better it is to help our team. Basically, anything that requires like plant construction, AutoCAD, other kind of programs that help facilitate those process and presentations to clients. Obviously, there's also the arboriculture department, so any certified arboriculture certification, safety again. I forgot the word, but it's mostly also equipment, machinery and equipment operations, obviously. So again, depending on the role you're filling within the industry, you have different skill sets.
Yeah, there's a slew of them out there, and which I think honestly makes our industry fun. There's just so much different, from software and technology to safety to plant identification to equipment. There's just so many pieces and parts and components to what we do. You hit on one there with the safety side, and I remember when I was young in my career, I had to take an OSHA 10. I think that's what it's probably. I think they still offer the 10-hour course. Might need to fact check me there, but there was a 10-hour and a 30-hour. And I remember taking the 10-hour initially because I had to have the certification to do something on site at that time. And I remember that was like a mind shift when I said, oh, okay, we should probably lead with safety on almost anything that we do out there, whether that's stretch and flex in the morning, whether that's digging an irrigation head up and making sure that we have no power lines in the area, or how we go about doing a lockout tag out for something as well. So I think the certification piece, like to Yara's comments, like there's different kinds out there in the industry. You need to find what might move you farther, faster, essentially. And I know the safety side, you can never go wrong starting there as well. So that's great feedback here. I appreciate that. I think a couple good resources if people don't know and they're new to the industry. CIMA is great for the snow side. NALP is a great partner to the industry on the landscape maintenance and construction side, and you can start there. I know both of those have some good certification programs as well in the industry. Awesome. Well, I think we have a poll coming up next here. We'll pull that up here in just a second. Would be great for you to interact with that poll as we go. And remember that we also have any questions you can drop in the chat as well. Looks like we've got a few coming in there. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and pull up the poll if we can. All right. Career in industry. Question 1, how do you prefer to stay updated on the industry trends and best practices? So we've got a couple options up there that you can select from. So please jump in the poll and make a selection there. I know most of the time I probably end up in the social media bucket, mostly on LinkedIn, finding out about stuff. That's me personally, but I cannot vote in this poll, so please do. All right. let's go ahead and move forward. Yara, we're going to stay with you here on the specialized role conversation. So, there's roles requiring additional training certification, which we kind of talked about. What value do you see in specializing your expertise inside the industry, right? Like, so we talked through your experience, Jess's experience, Joanna's experience. You all have held many different roles inside the industry, which is, I think, why this conversation is so rich for us. But in specializing, how do you view specializing your expertise within your career and within the industry?
So, sorry. In my perspective, specializing in your expertise helps develop an attention to details, basically, and try to know more the market and the needs of your clients so that you can address them faster and in a very efficient way. That's if I understood your question correctly. So, Shawn, if I did not, please correct me and let me know. Um, So by developing skills, obviously, it's easier to pick up on clients' needs, answering them quicker, providing them with the tools and information that they need to make enlightened decisions about their sites. We've encountered that after the pandemic, unfortunately, because during the pandemic, people gave less attention to their sites because less presential presence is needed at the offices. And once the pandemic is done, people are coming back to the offices, and that's when they realize, like, oh, the sites has been let go. So, and obviously other factors come into play. So more attention to detail, focus areas like main entrances, different factors that come into play is like pedestrian traffic, what kind of plants would best be suited in different areas, depending on the soil composition, the sun composition, shade or sun, water need, and so on. So that's what makes it easier through expertise to pick up on and kind of like help the client identify or focus their attention to, basically.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, just based on what you talked to there, there's no shortage of specialization inside of our industry, whether you're focused on soils, plants, equipment. I think, there's the gamut out there. I think one of the things too that probably helped me the most was like identifying a partner that's specialized in a role. I remember I had this gentleman my first day when I started at my job after college was an irrigation supervisor. And I didn't know anything about irrigation at that time, but yet there I was as an irrigation crew leader. And I needed to learn pretty quick on how to cut pipe and glue pipe and, how to troubleshoot a valve and those types of things. And the amount of information I got from that individual just working alongside of him was invaluable. And it allowed me to do it in a way where I was still getting work done and also learning as well. So I think, one piece of advice just coming off what you said, Yara, is find that individual. If you want to have a specific opportunity, you want to specialize in the industry, find someone that's already there, right? And then partner up with them and see if you can glean some of the knowledge off of them as well. I think that's great feedback. Awesome. So Jojo, I want to go over to you. There it is. I called you Jojo. I was like 5 for 5 on Joanna. Want to discuss the importance of ongoing education, right? We know you had reference to, like, you had made a decision to pursue continuing graduate degree, your MBA. But outside of that, right, there's also other opportunities to grow your education and certification. So I'd love to hear just your advice in upskilling in general in the industry, but also pursuing continuing education. So if we have an audience member out there that's thinking about, like, how do I go about this? What are some key success factors or key, key disciplines that I need to focus on when I'm thinking about that? I'd love to just get a recap from you about, like, how you navigated that internally.
Well, I am not, there are some people that know what they want to be when they grow up from a young age, and I was not one of those people. So it is like a journey, as I'm like figuring out, what do I like? What do I not like? What am I good at? What am I not so good at? So that was part of that process. Was I knew I had a lot of ambition and drive, but not a lot of focus on what specifically I was driving towards. And that was what went into me deciding to make that choice. Was like, I knew I had potential. On paper, like, my resume was not a reflection of necessarily what I was capable of. So part of it was like, if I can get this degree and show people that I am capable of more than maybe what I was also youngish in my career. I think I was 29 or 30 when I went back. Um, so that was part of it. What I had said before, like the unexpected, um, what was unexpected that came out of it was that it actually just instilled, I generated and built so much confidence within myself. It was tough. I was working full time and going to school, and it was probably harder than I expected. And so I also just, anytime we go through something hard, it just is going to develop confidence in ourselves. And which is probably more important than people recognizing that in us, is like our ability to sort of advertise for ourselves or know that we can go do something that's maybe outside of our current wheelhouse. So that was part of it. But I think like the pursuing education or degrees is true. My brain is splitting in like, so if you're someone like me who doesn't know what he or she wants to be when they grow up, and you're like, well, let me see, like, what am I good at? What am I not good at? Show myself what I'm made of, show other people what I can do. But also, like Yara and you were saying, there's a lot of specialties that you can go into, and skilled trades are a very special thing. And if you can, like, if you have a focus, if you are not like me and you have a focus and you know sort of the direction you want to go, to be a real expert in your trade is a very special and valuable thing. And to continue to invest in yourself in that way, is very powerful. Knowledge is power. Anytime, like even if you don't get out of it what you thought you were going to get out of it, there's no way that pursuing advanced education or a degree or additional skills will ever be a bad choice. My opinion. I feel like reluctant to speak so absolutely, but I can't see how that wouldn't be true. In any way.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
know it's going to be hard, right? Know it's going to be hard. Growing as a person outside of just your normal work hours and family obligations, but B, on the other side of it, you have a tremendous amount more of feeling of self-worth and discipline and achieving something. Is that an accurate summary?
Yeah, very much so. And I would say in terms of, I'm reminded, so BrightView, I leveraged BrightView's, they have like a tuition reimbursement program. So that was a large part of it for me too. If I had to pay for all of that out of pocket, I might not have done it, even all those other things considered. So like look within your organization in regards to, and it's not just for a degree, like I could have used it if I wanted to go after a certain certificate of some kind or attend a certain class. So if you're going to be investing in yourself, your company is also investing in you, hopefully. Like, do your due diligence and see if there are ways that make that hard thing a little bit easier on you. And with additional support.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think one, for the companies that are on this, like understanding that there is value in those programs and offering those programs. Just, Joanna's a testament to that. 3 different roles inside the same company over approximately 9 years, and getting that advanced degree. Might have not done it if that wasn't there. So certainly a tip of the hat to that program. And then, for those people that are potentially looking to pursue something, whether it be an advanced MBA degree, whether it be your bachelor's, whether it be a trade, a certification, whatever it might be, have those conversations with your leadership at your specific company and see if there's a pathway there for them to support you, if not fully, maybe partially as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Great. I appreciate that, Joanna. Want to pivot a little bit, Jess, over to you, just because you've got some very specific experience here, right? When we think about careers in the space, I'm thinking there's landscape design, landscape architecture, there's operations, accounts, leadership inside the business. There's a software and a tech aspect of it more and more every day, right? I've seen it especially over the past 5 years, but certainly over the past 10 years. It's gone that, and you've had roles in the field where you've been, tasked with training people about software, and then now you're actually in a software company in the SaaS space. So, you've got a pretty unique perspective on here. So I'd love to maybe just understand from you and your experience, what are some keys to think about when you think tech or when you think software in the industry specifically? It'd be great to just get your specialized insight here.
Yeah, so I think that there's obviously different levels to which people understand technology, right? So I think overall, I've been involved in a lot of software implementations throughout my time. And obviously, like you said, I do that all the time, every day now. I think the overall goal of tech, if you're bringing it into your business and teaching your crews how to use it, is to truly just keep it simple. I think a lot of the launches that I've done and a lot of the integrations that I've done are very tech heavy and very challenging for a lot of individuals that maybe aren't so tech savvy. So really trying to keep whatever software we're bringing into the system as simple as possible so that it's easily learnable by everyone in the company. In the field, obviously, we have crews that are utilizing apps to clock in and out, which is great. But when we get to this other area of requiring them to do things that just take too much time away from what they're doing in the field, right? The guys are supposed to be in the field performing work. So you need to create or purchase a software that's easy enough for them to use that doesn't take away from their day-to-day aspect. Because tech can be great, but it can also be a hindrance to everything we do, right? It could create problems that cause me to do 27 clicks in order to just get to one place. So I think the most important thing, whether it's in the field, sales, a leadership role with dashboards, is really having a system that is simplified and easy to use, because everyone has varying degrees of technological abilities. But on the other side of things, there are so many tools. Just, if you Google or YouTube, I mean, you can learn so many things just by watching a 5-minute video now these days, right? That wasn't something that we had, or I had access to when I started, right? I truly had to rely on the people around me. But technology is so advanced now where we're connected with everyone everywhere all the time and have the ability to gain so much knowledge. And really, like, we should all be utilizing as much tech as possible in a very concise way, right? Because I have, 7 million apps on my phone. I go to 5 every day.
Mhm. Yeah, I would, I got a couple things out of what you just said, right? Like simplify was one of them. And then I think it was interesting how you framed it. It popped something up in my head. Like the technology that you use should enable your teams, especially out in the field, rather than taking away or dragging them down on efficiency. And it's just, I don't know, it's weird. It's popped in my head. I'm going to say it. I think about maybe technology, the way you said that about mulch in the landscape, right? So when I'm consulting a customer in the past about mulch and they want to put red mulch in, I'm sorry, I can't stand red mulch, right? And so the question I would always ask them to like help them understand in a very polite way is like, when you look at your landscape, do you want to see red mulch or do you want to see the landscape? Like, and hopefully they would say the landscape, right? Then don't do red mulch because that's all you're going to see. And you can almost think about what you said, technology in the same vein, right? Like, do you want your team to be just focused on the technology or do you want them to be focused on the actual customer? And that enables them to do that essentially. So I think that's a great takeaway, right? Like you should seek out technology because it is everywhere. And I mean, you can buy 7 million different software packages and apps. And like you said, you're going to go to 5 of them, right, that you use. So I think that's great insight. Awesome. I wanted to dive deeper on there, but I think for the sake of time, we'll continue on our agenda. So Yara, I want to talk a little bit about just management of business and the roles inside. We've got supervisor, project managers, we've got business owners. There's key skills that I think help people in the industry, leadership, business acumen, customer relationship building, essentially. What are some key skills that lead to success within the industry, and maybe some specific that have led to your successful career in the landscape industry?
I guess first and foremost, it's mostly communication. As long as you can bridge the communication, whether it's with your own teams, with suppliers, with subcontractors, or even clients, as long as you can bridge the communication to both understand the same goal, That's the first and foremost thing, that because it goes across the board. In terms of skill set, I would say being proactive, because a lot of times clients wouldn't actively ask to improve their sites, but then we are the maintenance people of the site, and if we don't tell them like, hey, this part of your area needs to be improved, it's looking a bit neglected, you need to invest X budget, that could help. There's also plant identification in terms of landscaping, but in terms of both internally with our teams and externally, leadership, initiative, proaction, the willingness to learn new skills as well. Because obviously, as anyone in a specific industry, they can grow organically as long as they build their skill set upon skill set to reach a certain role that they envision for themselves. So for us specifically, or like for myself, as I mentioned earlier, I was as an estimator, and then because there was a need to fill specific skill set, I grew into the role that I have right now. And my purpose right now is to help my team be as efficient as possible. And that's where I bring back in the need for technology. For instance, in the past, we used to draw maps by T-squares and technical pens, and now we work with AutoCAD. Again, on sites, we used to use wheels to take measurements. Now we use technology to measure and create plans. So learning new skill set throughout time makes it easier for us to grow with the company and in the industry, and make it easier to communicate, because sometimes communication can be verbal, can be graphic, so it can be different aspects.
Yeah, that's great insight. And Joanna, I want to ask you this question too here in just a minute, kind of the same vein, right? Like as far as, what are some key skills that have led to your success in the industry? But just to sit on what Yara said there, I think the communication piece, I am 100% bought into that being the most important skill that's out there, because everything we do is communicate. I've seen an account manager and an operations manager have, left brain, right on people they're saying the same thing, and I'm sitting there watching it, and they're saying the same thing to one another, but they're just, the way they're saying it is not connecting, it's not tying the bow on it, and it's just causing a bunch of issues. So I think understanding like how to communicate, but also being like variable in how you communicate, because not everybody wants to be communicated in the same way. So I think like that's like the secret sauce to like honestly anything in life, probably like relationships or work relationships or anything. But certainly having success in the industry, I think that's a number one for me as well. So that's great insight. Joanna, would love to maybe just understand, we'll get to our second poll here in a second, but would love to understand your thoughts on just key skills there.
Yeah, completely agree about the communication. And that also goes like being a good communicator means being a good listener too. I think a lot of times we think, oh, if I can effectively verbalize what I mean, I'm a good communicator, but communication, I think that means both, which is important, particularly because we are in a service industry. So we aren't selling widgets or products. We are providing a service, which means there's a lot of customer service that goes along with that. So totally agree. On that leadership too, like you had mentioned it, and it sparked this thought in my brain about leadership goes in so many directions. I think a lot of times we think of it very literally from a hierarchical standpoint of like, if you are a manager on an org chart, then you are leading the people below you. But you could sometimes, I think some of the most effective leaders I've met are people who are really good at leading their peers on a peer-to-peer level, or like leading up. Like if you have a leader that maybe you don't feel is that effective, or they need to level up in their own way, and maybe their leader isn't doing a great job at that. Like there are ways to be a leader that don't have to be so literal from like, oh, I am managing people and therefore I have to be a good leader, which is also very important. But it's a web that goes in many directions, which I think is so important no matter what position you're in. That's always like so useful. We had mentioned before, but for me especially, like problem solving, and I think having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset, like being able to see things as opportunities instead of I think getting bogged down in the frustration of like roadblock after roadblock, if you're in a season of that, or it can feel like you just keep running up against stuff. Which I guess it parlays into like being able to be nimble and flexible and tolerant, especially depending on where you are in our business. Like I'm in Ohio, so it's very seasonal. So sometimes you just literally have to ebb and flow with what's going on, and you had a plan for today, and then it has to change, and you have to be able to flex in that way and be tolerant of like ever-changing circumstances. But that also applies to technology. Like technology can be frustrating, and it's like we have to be able to either problem solve for that or be open-minded enough to like try something new. Technology is always changing. It's always going to, it is a forever, it is a constant in the sense that it will always be here, but it will forever be changing. And so if we can just sort of ebb and flow with that and always be open to that, I think those things go a long, long way.
Yeah, no, wise words. Appreciate you adding to that conversation, Joanna. All right,
Yeah.
let's pull up our second poll here, and we'll ask for the audience involvement here as we go. And just a reminder too, there's the ability to answer or enter in your questions for our Q&A that's coming up in just about 10 minutes. So careers in the industry, question 2, what do you think is the biggest challenge in advancing your career in the landscape industry? So lack of opportunities, need for more training and education, navigating career transitions, or keeping up with technology advancements. Some good choices there. Would be great for you to join in on the poll here. And while we wait for this to close out and get some of the responses, one thing I think you mentioned, Yara, just on the communication side, I think you mentioned like communication is both like audible and visual as well. I thought that's a really good perspective on it, because I think, whether we're talking on the phone, in person, over email, or via, maps or any visual communication that happens, I think being clear and concise is very critical. So I just wanted to make sure to highlight that. I loved that insight there, visual and audible.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I'm curious if we've got our results here. We do. So lack of opportunities, 30% take the lead, or no, it doesn't take the lead. Need for more training, 10%. Navigating career transitions takes the lead. And then keeping up with technology and advancements, 20%. When I'm looking at this, that's interesting. Navigating career transitions, I would say that is probably one of the most difficult things is, if you're in one box, I think maybe, I don't know, was it you, Joanna, that was mentioning that you were just kind of doing a lot of different stuff and you didn't necessarily have a title at your last position. And if you're not like specifically focused on one title or job description, that could probably be difficult making that transition for sure. So I appreciate everybody being involved in that poll there. Awesome. Okay, so let's go over, Joanna, I want to stick with you on this one with industry trends and opportunities. So, do you see in your day-to-day, is the sustainability side, the innovation side, the technology side of the industry, do you see any of this in your day-to-day? Is it gaining popularity? What is a key innovation you're seeing developing in the industry, key innovation or two that you've kind of noticed over the past, let's just keep it, within the past year or two, that you've seen and have any insight to?
Yeah, I think, tell me if when I answer this, I'm answering your question correctly, but the first thing that comes to mind is, so in Columbus, Ohio specifically, and I imagine if it's not already, this will take off in other areas, but Intel is building a large new facility here. So they've bought up a lot of farmland, which was what farmland. And now there's a lot of other industry moving here that is also buying up farmland. So I think as a part of these negotiations, they are committed to preserving some of this space. So what we're seeing a trend in is like wildlife and prairie areas, like pollinator habitats. So this isn't, at least in my experience, this isn't something that I have seen a lot of previously. And it's all about supply and demand. So like it's becoming popular in some areas, and now all of a sudden the snowball is starting to grow. And it's something that, we want to be able to, address that when someone comes to it with you, when there is a demand for it, say, okay, we can supply the solution for this and the whatever. And then also offer it as another, mind you, I'm aware as I'm talking like, oh yeah, I'm a business developer. This is from a sales brain, but like offer it to customers as something that maybe wasn't on their radar, but maybe it like saves them money in the long run. If they have a lot of land and they don't necessarily need to mow all of it, maybe this is another solution we can also offer proactively. So did I understand your question correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're
Or so
looking
I'm
for.
sure.
Like
Okay.
when you're
Yeah.
out there selling new work, you're seeing a lot of requests and a lot of development happen along these lines, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
As long as it's not a rain garden. I remember when rain gardens were so popular. I see Jess rolling her eyes. They were so popular and they just turn into a bunch of weeds around a drain is what they end up turning around unless you've got the right maintenance program. So I definitely understand that. And I think Columbus, where you're at, Joanna, is becoming a kind of a hub for data centers and things like that. So that makes a lot of sense. Those are usually more progressively thinking companies that are installing those. So and usually on the leading edge of it as well. So that's good feedback, good insight for the team. Jess, would love to maybe get your quick insight as well from an innovation standpoint. Are you seeing any key developments in the past 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so obviously, same as Joanna, I've seen the pollinator gardens, I've installed the pollinator gardens. I will not install a rain garden, but it's just my personal preference. But on the other side of that, so we have autonomous mowers. That's huge, right? We went from electric mowers to autonomous mowers. I think there was some talk about, people concerned about the electric mowers when they started not being, that precise when it came to what the output was. But I think there's been tons of advancements as it relates to electric equipment as well as autonomous. Then we look at drones, a lot of people utilizing drones to do aerial images or before and after photos. And then obviously our company, we do AI takeoffs, but in the same token, I'm seeing AI designs for landscapes and stuff like that. So now with the use of AI, we can, do the takeoff, but then we can also get some ideas to redesign. So I just tried one of them like on the front of my house, and it completely redesigned the front of my house, landscape and all. So there's tools out there now and tech out there now that you can use, if nothing else, just to get some ideas, right? So I think I've seen a huge shift in that aspect, and maybe just because I'm in it now, so I'm more in tune with what's happening as it relates to AI and the abilities that holds. But I've seen that obviously ramp up a lot in the last year or so.
Yeah, definitely. That's great insights. And the autonomous mowers are making some great strides, and there's some great companies with a lot of industry experience inside those companies as well. And then my wife actually just did an AI renovation in our kitchen and dining room. So I imagine we'll probably, if I know her, we'll probably be doing that soon as well. So you can use AI inside and outside. I think the other thing too, like Chat GPT, like I know it was a big thing about a year ago, and it still continues to be a big thing, but Chat GPT for Omni came out a couple weeks ago. And if you're not using it, if you're not using the paid version, I would encourage you to use that just from an audience perspective. It's great for iterating on ideas. It's great for searching out information that you don't really know how to ask for on like a Google or something like that, but it can really help you drill down on information you need quicker, specifically to our industry as well. So, all right, let's a little commercial break here before we get into our last topic. I know the time is fleeting here and we've got about 10 minutes left. So would love to introduce our audience to our Accelerate platform. As you can see there, so we scroll through the screen, Accelerate is our end-to-end business management software. It really, I always say it takes us from takeoff to invoice. It's so much more that probably doesn't do it justice, but it really takes our first product, our auto measure AI generated takeoffs for aerial and blueprints, and then welds it together with the rest of the workflows inside your business. So we've got an offer here today, so you can explore Accelerate with a free pilot. Scan that QR code and you will get $1,000 worth of AI powered takeoffs if you decide to go through a pilot of that software with us. So please reach out via that QR code. We'll actually probably leave this up during our Q&A session as well, so that we can give you ample time to scan that code. But feel free to book a demo with us and we'll walk you through that in a little bit deeper fashion. All right, moving into our last topic, and then we'll go into our Q&A. And this is really a round robin for everybody. Joanna, I think I'll start with you on this, but we're going to wrap up on technology and the integration. So, the integration of technology into our industry is just, it's exponentially getting quicker and quicker, just like technology in any part of the world. Smart irrigation systems, landscaping, software, AI, autonomous mowers, everything. So with that, it's all cool. Like I think it's all cool and it's fun and exciting, but there's an important piece to that with staying up to date on technology advancements. I know personally, when I see another piece of software coming to our company, this is probably like the elder millennial or Gen Xer in me. I'm just kind of like another thing to learn, right? And so I think it's important to like how you shift out of that mindset and say, okay, how do I keep up to date on this? So I'd love to maybe get some key factors from you, and then we'll go over to Jess and then Yara to finish this off. But staying up to date on tech, and what are some key takeaways on how to do that for our audience?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is, and I think this is sort of what you were touching on, like have a discerning but open mindset. You could very easily overwhelm yourself by trying to stay up to date on all of the tech that's coming out, which then kind of defeats the point in and of itself, because you're just drowning in the overwhelm and you're not actually being effective with what you're trying to learn. So, but the other, if the pendulum swings too far in the other direction, like you're shutting out something that could be a very useful tool to you, to your team, to your customers, whatever seat you sit in and how that serves the people you work with. So I think it's important to have an open mindset about like sort of what we had said before, like this is here to stay. The constant is that tech will continue to evolve and develop, and it will be a part of our everyday lives. But how can we have a sort of like a quick discerning mindset to be like, that's a good thing for me to dive into, learn more. And you know what, maybe I'm going to table that. That's not going to be of service to me or to us now, maybe ever. Yeah, I don't mean to contradict myself, but I think the balance of those two things is the key.
Yeah, I think we find a lot of answers in moderation, and that you can go try to tackle everything, which most of the time you'll tackle nothing. I think that's wise words, Joanna. I appreciate you sharing that. Jess, would love to get your input on just maybe some key success factors or key ways you look at managing the technology boom.
Yeah, so I TikTok, right? That's how I stay up to date on. I don't know. I figure that's the way everybody does it now, but so there is a lot, and I agree with Joanna. It's hard because you see all of these ads all the time, right? We're constantly bombarded with things. And as soon as I type in something into my Google search, it automatically pops up on every one of my social media platforms. So I'm constantly inundated with, because I'm always looking to figure out how to best organize myself, how to, we're managing a lot of projects. So I find that I get into these, and then like Joanna said, I fall off because it's like, well, that doesn't work the way I need to. So really, not being influenced by everything we see, and really just kind of focusing in on things that are urgent at the moment, really, because like what's going to make the biggest impact for me? Like, is it something that manually organizes my calendar for me, or what's going to make the biggest impact in my day? So really focusing in on what that tech is, and then spending the time getting to know it from that aspect. But also, like, just in the landscape industry, like we'll be going to that L&L Tech Conference, which I'm excited about, because now you get an opportunity to see all the technological advances in the lawn and landscape industry. So that's another great way to kind of stay on top of some of the new tech that's popping up in the industry as well.
Awesome. Great insights there, Jess. Yara, just to wrap us up on this topic before we get into our Q&A, what are your thoughts here?
Well, there's a lot of ways to actually stay up to date with the industry, innovations and technology, obviously with shows and conferences. But the selection process is based mostly if that tech or innovation answers the need that you have. And the other aspect of it is also its application in your process. Does it fit? So it's through trial and error that you identify what actually works for you or not. Obviously, there's a lot of things and very interesting things that are in the market and in the industry, but it might not be the best fit. But through trial and error, we will find the thing that works best for us.
Yeah, great feedback. And I kind of like I like that viewpoint on it because it reminds me a lot of like when we can go back to sales because that's where I'm comfortable, right? Like when you think about qualifying a sale, you're trying to find not like the 18 things that are bothering them, but the like one or two that are going to cause them to make a decision to do something different. And maybe we could look at approaching technology in the same way, right? Like what's my bottleneck in my workflows today? Let's get rid of everything else and pick that major one and find a piece of technology that solves that. And then, there's always these shiny objects of like, hey, this can adjust my schedule for me without, but is that really your bottleneck? Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's time tracking or something along those lines. And, how do you go and solve the biggest problem first? I think too many times we get focused on having too many problems, right? Maybe we just need to forget about some of them and focus on what the major issues are. So I think that's great feedback from all three of you. Thank you for contributing to that. And I've left ourselves 3 minutes for Q&A, so I've done a really good job facilitating this, he says facetiously, but we'll pull up the questions and we'll go through it here. And I think, let me pull them up again. I think we'll go bottom to top here. So Joanna, maybe I'll lean on you for your feedback here. I'll read it out for everybody to know the question. I'm an operations manager for a third-party company that hires local landscapers across the U.S. How can I help our contractors be more proactive, suggesting extra landscaping ideas? So really just a thought process on how can we increase the throughput on being proactive with suggesting ancillary outside of the contract, it sounds like. Any thoughts there, Joanna?
I'm trying to think of it through the lens of this like third party company. I think, I mean, so sales brain again, the first thought that's coming to mind is like making it clear about how this also benefits whoever that landscaper is that they're working with, right? Like that's the most efficient, quickest way from A to B. Is just to and I'm thinking about communication too, right? Like also just educating whoever that landscaper is that like this is what we're looking for. This is part of what we're looking for in the partnership is you to be proactive about suggesting these types of ideas and work order opportunities. We're not looking for a landscaper that's just gonna like mow, blow, and go, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what like the communication piece we were talking about earlier. Like,
Right.
how can you clearly communicate the why back to them? Because I think like even establishing metrics for them, like with every with every invoice, whatever horizon timeline you want, or with every check into the property weekly, it'd be great if you could send us a proposal. It doesn't have to be 10 all at once, but I mean, there's statistics out there that you're gonna have a higher level of retention and ancillary penetration into a job if you're providing proactive proposals. You're not going to sell all of them, right? But there's definitely a history of a higher retention if you're being a proactive partner with them. So I think that's great advice. All right, and I think we've got time for one more question. Jess, this is actually sent over your direction. For industry vets, what would you say to someone looking at taking a role in the green industry tech? What surprised you? What are you enjoying the most? That's a great question.
Cool. So what would I say to someone? I would say do it. I would say don't hesitate as much as I hesitated and just do it. Obviously you have to figure out what your skill set is and where you're going to thrive in that business. But I think Shawn and I talked for so long about this, and I think like Joanna had said previously, like I didn't think I could do it. I was like, I think I could, but I don't know if I'd be good at it. But I think just taking the step gave me enough confidence to just really get in and figure it out. What surprised me, everything, just everything. It is so fast paced. It is a massive shift. We're lucky, and I say lucky in the green industry, especially in Michigan, because we go through these ebbs and flows of, busy seasons. And, by 4th of July, it's like we're taking vacations and we're pausing on, all this heavy workload. That's not the case here. Like this is just a constant flow of work, which isn't a bad thing. Like it has really challenged me. And I feel like just in the last 8 months I've been here, I've grown so much professionally with the people that I'm involved with on a daily basis. I wish I wouldn't have waited to make the decision, quite honestly.
Awesome feedback. Appreciate that, Jess. I think, my only advice there would be, I personally going into the tech had a huge amount of imposter syndrome, still do to this day, felt it this morning as well. I think lean into that as a person. I think there's gold in feeling that way, because it means you're stepping out of your comfort zone. I think that's a good piece of advice there. Don't be afraid to explore something different. Okay, I know we're 2 minutes after. We're going to wrap up. Yara, Joanna, Jess, you have been stellar on this panel and given the audience so many different pieces of insight and feedback into how to make their career more robust and more valuable. So thank you so much to all three of you. You've been fantastic, and thank you for our audience. We'll see you on our next Fuel Up series. Hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.